Welcome back to the deep dive. So today we need to talk about the lenses we use, the way we look at the world. Because usually when we look at international politics, and I'm thinking specifically about West Africa here,
Yeah.
we have this standard Western toolkit we bring with us.
Right. A very specific framework.
Exactly. We look at a country, we check for a parliament, we check for voting booths, and then we categorize them. It's a binary. Democracy is good, autocracy is bad. It's efficient, sure, but I have a feeling you're about to tell me it's completely missing the point.
Oh, it's not just missing the point. I mean, in many cases, it's like we're watching a completely different game than the one that's actually being played on the ground. That binary framework, democracy versus dictatorship, it's comfortable for us.
It's in a headline.
If it's in a headline, perfectly. But when we're looking at the Mano River unions, specifically Guinea, Sierra Leone, and Liberia, that framework it fails. It fails to explain why things happen the way they do. It doesn't explain why a population might, say, cheer for a military coup.
Right. Or why a leader who is democratically elected suddenly just struggles to command any respect.
Exactly.
Because we see a coup and we immediately think collapse of law and order. But the people on the street might be seeing something totally different. And that's what we're unpacking today. We're diving into some fascinating analysis that suggests the political heartbeat of this region. It isn't regulated by constitutions or Western-style checks and balances?
No, not at all. It's regulated by two ancient, deeply rooted leadership archetypes from the Manding world.
Archetypes that have been around for centuries.
For centuries, long before any colonial borders were ever drawn on a map. They're sort of the ghosts in the machine, if you will.
Right.
On one side, you have the Mansa.
The Mansa.
And on the other side, you have the Fama. And the tension between these two, this constant push and pull, is what's really driving the stability or the instability of the region today.
The Mansa and the Fama. Okay, just hearing the words, they carry a certain weight. So let's start with the first one. The Mansa. The source material calls this figure the consensual sovereign. Now, when I hear sovereign, I immediately picture a king. Louis XIV. L'État, c'est moi. I am the state. But that word consensual, that really throws a wrench in the works.
It should. It absolutely should. Because the Mansa is not a king in that European sense. A Mansa is a leader whose legitimacy is almost, it's distinct from his ability to use force. It's not about coercion.
So they don't rule because they have the biggest army.
No, or the deepest pockets. A Mansa rules because of a profound, almost metaphysical connection to the community's spiritual and moral values.
So it's not might makes right. It's more like right makes might.
That's closer, yeah, but even that kind of simplifies it. Think of it more like a vertical connection. The Mansa is seen as the link between the people, their ancestors, and the land itself. The power, as the source points out, comes from collective agreement.
So that's not just a simple majority vote.
No, absolutely not. This is not 50% plus one.
Right, because in a modern democracy, you get 51% of the vote, you own the store.
Yeah.
You can pass laws, change policy, and the other 49% just has to, wait 4 years and try again?
Which is actually a pretty aggressive way to run a society, if you really stop and think about it. The Mansa tradition operates on consensus. Real consensus. It's about unity and moral leadership. If you're a Mansa, you aren't forcing your will on people. You are embodying their will. You're a harmonizer.
Okay, let's be practical for a second, though. That sounds beautiful, but it also sounds incredibly slow. I mean, if you have to wait for collective agreement and spiritual alignment before you make a move, how do you ever, pave a road? How do you pass a budget?
And you've just hit on the critical friction point. The Mansa archetype requires an immense amount of patience. It's all about the palaver tree tradition, endless discussion, mediation, bringing in the elders, smoothing over every single grievance until the community moves forward as one block.
It's slow.
It is slow, but the trade-off is that once a decision is made, it is rock solid. There's no opposition party plotting to tear it down the next day.
Because everyone already agreed.
Everyone's already on board.
So it's high maintenance, but high stability.
It's my moral stability, yes. The Mansa is expected to prioritize the community's well-being above literally everything else. It sets a massive bar for leaders. You have to be a sage, a father figure, and a spiritual guide all wrapped in one.
And when it works?
When it works, it creates this profound sense of peace and legitimacy. It's the kind of leadership that feels safe.
Safe, but
yeah,
maybe a little vulnerable. Because not everyone wants to sit under a tree and talk until they agree. Sometimes there are bad actors. Sometimes there are invaders.
And that is exactly where the Mansa model hits its limit, because you can't negotiate with a burning building.
You can't build consensus with a bandit.
Precisely.
Enter the Fama.
Enter the Fama, the military strongman.
Now, this is the one. This is the archetype that I think Western observers feel like they recognize. We see a guy in fatigues, sunglasses. He takes over the TV station, and we say, aha, a dictator.
We have a box for that.
We do. But the source material suggests we need to be really careful with that label. It says the Fama actually has a specific and even legitimate function in this cultural worldview.
This is so crucial to understand. A Fama isn't just a villain in this story. The Fama is a response to necessity. If the Mansa is the soul of the society, the Fama is its shield.
The shield.
The source defines the Fama's authority as being grounded in strength and the capacity to maintain order.
Capacity. That's a really interesting word choice. It's not about permission, it's about ability.
Correct. The Mansa asks for permission. The Fama demonstrates capacity. The motivation for the Fama historically is to protect the community through decisive action. So imagine a scenario where the consensus has totally broken down. Maybe there's ethnic violence or a border incursion or just total gridlock where the palaver has gone on for too long and the granaries are empty.
People stop looking for a sage.
And they start looking for a savior.
Someone who can cut the knot.
Exactly. They look for someone who can cut the knot. The Fama represents direct rule. It's the demonstration of power. It's kinetic. It's immediate. And for a population that feels frightened or chaotic, the Fama offers something the Mansa simply cannot: immediate relief from uncertainty.
Okay, that explains the psychology of what we call the popular two. We see it on the news, the military takes over, and thousands of people are in the streets cheering, and the anchors on CNN are just baffled. They're asking, why are they celebrating the end of their democracy?
Because for them, they aren't seeing the end of democracy. They are seeing the return of the Fama. They're seeing a restoration of order after a period where the Mansa, or, the elected leader pretending to be a Mansa, failed to deliver.
So it's a pendulum. You'd have these two ghosts. The Mansa, spiritual, consensual, unifying, but slow. And then the Fama, strong, military, decisive, but potentially dangerous.
Potentially very dangerous. Because while the Mansa risks stagnation, the Fama risks tyranny. The whole point of the Fama is to use force to protect the community.
But without those spiritual checks and balances.
Without the Mansa's influence, that force often turns inward.
Yeah.
And the protector becomes the predator.
And that's the tragedy we see playing out over and over again.
Yeah.
But let's bring this to right now. We're talking about Guinea, Sierra Leone, Liberia. These are modern nation states. They have parliaments, seats at the UN. They have 4G networks. How do these ancient archetypes actually interface with the 21st century?
Well, this is where it gets really messy. Because you have all these modern institutions, constitutions, Supreme Courts, electoral commissions, that are basically superimposed on top of this deep cultural software.
Layered right on top.
Right. So when a leader is elected in Freetown or Conakry, they step into a modern office, but the expectations placed on them by the people are still shaped by the Mansa and the Fama.
So a voter might cast a ballot for a president, but deep down they're judging him on whether he has the moral aura of a Mansa.
100%. Voters are looking for that spiritual legitimacy. They want a leader who can unify the different groups, who speaks with the weight of the ancestors. That's the Mansa legacy. But, and here's the trap, as soon as that leader faces a crisis, maybe an economic crash or a pandemic, the population's anxiety spikes. And what do people crave when they're anxious?
The Fama. They want him to bang the table and just fix it.
They want the strong man. So you have this impossible tightrope for a modern leader in the Mano River Union. They're elected to be a Mansa, to build consensus, to follow the rule of law. But the moment things get tough, they are pressured to act like a Fama, to bypass the law and use force.
And if they don't, if they stick to the Mansa script?
If they say, well, let's debate this in Parliament for 6 months, they look weak. The military starts rumbling in the barracks. The people on the street start grumbling that the leader has no teeth.
But if they do pivot, if they say, okay, I'm going to rule by decree, I'm arresting my opponents to save the state.
Then they lose the moral legitimacy of the Mansa. They become a tyrant. They might survive for a while in fear, but they've broken that social contract. The source material really highlights this lens. It explains why we see these leaders who start out as democratic darlings and then eventually slide into authoritarianism.
They aren't just turning evil.
No, they're sliding from one archetype to the other just to try and maintain control.
It's almost like they're trying to hack the system. I'll use the Mansa vibe to get elected, and then the Fama vibe to stay in power.
The civilian Fama. It's a very common hybrid. You wear the suit and tie, but you use the police like a personal guard. The problem is this region has a very low tolerance for fakes. You can't fake the spiritual consensus of the Mansa, and you can't fake the raw strength of the Fama. If you try to be both, you often end up being neither.
You're just a corrupt politician.
And that is the most dangerous position of all.
Why?
Because that creates a vacuum, a legitimacy vacuum. If the president is neither a wise sage nor a strong protector, then the system is empty. And nature abhors a vacuum.
And that's when the young colonel steps in.
That's usually when the young colonel in the military steps in and says, I am the real Fama. I will restore order. And the cycle restarts.
Wow. The cycle just restarts. This makes me understand the Mano River Union so much better. It's not just fragile democracies. It's a region that is actively wrestling with two legitimate, powerful, but contradictory ideas of what power even is.
And you have to remember, these concepts are tied to survival. The Mansa evolved to keep the peace in a complex society. The Fama evolved to ensure survival in a hostile world. These aren't just, aesthetic choices. They are survival strategies that have been coded into the culture for centuries.
So when we, from the outside, are shouting, restore the Constitution, we're appealing to a document. But the internal dynamic is appealing to something much, much older.
We are appealing to procedure. They are wrestling with these huge existential questions of authority. Who can keep us safe versus who represents our soul?
It makes me wonder about the synthesis. I mean, is there a way out of this loop? The source hints that understanding these models is the first step. But can a modern leader actually pull off being both? Can you have the consensus of the Mansa with the decisiveness of the Fama?
That is the holy grail of governance, isn't it? Not just in West Africa, but everywhere. We all want to be heard, and we all want to be safe. In the Mano River Union, the most successful periods in their history have usually been when a leader managed to balance these traits. Maybe a Mansa who had strong generals he could trust, so he didn't have to be the Fama himself.
Or a Fama who was wise enough to listen.
Exactly, a Fama who was wise enough to listen to a council of elders, which gives him some of that Mansa legitimacy.
So it requires a team, a system, not just a Superman.
But modern politics, especially now, tends to focus on the individual Superman leader. And that just sets them up to fail. If you expect one human being to embody the infinite patience of a spiritual guide and the ruthless efficiency of a general, well, you're going to be disappointed.
And disappointment leads to instability. So let's bring this home for everyone listening. We've unpacked the consensual sovereign, the Mansa, who is rooted in spirit, unity, and agreement. We've unpacked the military strongman, the Fama, who is rooted in force, order, and action. And we've seen how these ghosts are haunting the ballot boxes of Guinea, Sierra Leone, and Liberia.
It's a lens that really changes how you read the news. The next time you see a headline about a crisis in West Africa, don't just ask, is this democratic? Ask yourself, is this a failure of the Mansa to act, or is this an overreach of a Fama?
It adds this whole layer of humanity to the politics. It's not just pawns on a chessboard. It's a deep cultural struggle for the right kind of leadership.
And it really challenges us to look at our own systems, too. We might not use the words Mansa and Fama, but we certainly have our own versions of the unifier versus the fighter.
That leads me right to the thought I want to leave everyone with today. It's easy to look at the Mano River Union and treat this as a foreign problem, but I want you to think about your own political instincts.
This is the uncomfortable part.
In times of deep instability, when the economy is crashing or there's a threat on the horizon or the world just feels like it's catching fire, do we naturally start to crave a Fama? Even if we preach the values of the Mansa, even if we say we love democracy and consensus, when push comes to shove, how many of us are secretly waiting for the person who will just bang the table and make it all stop? And is it actually possible for a single modern leader to embody both that spiritual consensus and that military strength without tearing their country or themselves apart?
It might be the question that defines our era.
Thanks for listening to The Deep Dive. We'll see you next time.